Hi, it's Leslie, your core training companion, and this little program is about the why. I hear this all the time in classes, how to do a movement. Woo, let's do this. Let's squeeze our booty. Let's do this. Let's do that. And at the end of the day, students still don't know why they're doing a movement. And truly, when we explain the purpose of a movement and how it translates to what somebody does, is magic. It's absolute magic. For example, as an equestrian, for me, if I were working on the reformer here, okay, and my goal was to strengthen my inner thighs, then I could go in and out, in and out, in and out all the time, right? I mean, we've done this in classes before. However, if I change my focus and why I'm doing this is as I press out, I pause for that moment and notice what I'm feeling in my inner thighs. And then when I start to lift through the pelvic floor and bring the carriage back in, I could almost maybe say this is similar to, but not really, but yet it translates to riding. So, in other words, as I pull in, I'm lifting through the pelvic floor. This could be translated into what happens when you're doing a sitting trot or you're in a canter and you're having to engage these muscles. Because you're not sitting on a horse loose, if your intention is to move with them, is to feel what's happening through your abductors, through the pelvic floor, through the core, etc., etc. But if all I'm doing is going in and out mindlessly, then I've lost the purpose of why I'm doing this movement. Same thing, I hear this all the time. Let's put the ball in between the thighs and squeeze it. But if I rode a horse and I'm squeezing my inner thighs the whole time, I would lose fluidity and I'd be riding with rigidity, which wouldn't translate very well to this thing called suppleness. So again, by having this ball here and not losing it, now imagine again that my goal is to feel my inner thighs. Don't drop the ball. If I go too far, I'm going to drop it. But yet, if I come in so tight and I'm squeezing it, I'm feeling it now up in my hip flexors. So once again, I'm looking at my neutral spine. My tailbone is dropped. I'm lifting through the abs. And that subtleness of where I should be feeling this movement is so vital if it's translating into something, for example, like riding. Now think about pickleball. Pickleball needs a lot of rotational movement. So if I'm only moving in the frontal plane and I'm going in and out, then I'm losing the ability then to think about if I'm having to do lateral movement like in pickleball. So in other words, let's just move this way. So as I press my carriage out and as I come back in and I sit back into my glute and hamstring, the likelihood of me strengthening my glute and hamstring, especially on this side, is much better than if I'm standing squeezing my glutes for no apparent reason, which I see all the time. Pickleball is quick, it's moving. So if I were to ask you to do this movement and think about sitting down, now let's just say you keep flexing forward and you're like, I'm not feeling my glute and hamstring. Well, it's because you're not in the right alignment. But now when I place the ball here and I press out, there's no negotiating this because if you're in the wrong alignment, then you first of all, you're going to lose the ball. But let's start to reach in and out. We're going to keep this knee straight for now. Press out and come in. Now I could bend this knee and push out and in as well. But my goal is to load up that muscle. So again, we do movements all the time, and there's thousands of movements. I mean, every exercise program from boot camp type classes to whatever, but yet I never hear the why. Why am I doing this movement? And I don't want you to think aesthetics, I want you to think function. So in other words, again, core training, just by learning how to breathe correctly and inhaling and exhaling, you're activating your core. Now, if you came to me and said, I want to do a bikini contest, I'm not your trainer. I'm not one that works on aesthetics. I'm somebody who says, let's work on function and why you're doing what you're doing. Guess what? The rest comes along. So in other words, once you start moving correctly and you understand why you're doing, now you become the athlete. Think about somebody like a Simone Biles that does, the movement over and over and over and over again to absolute perfection. And then of course there's times it won't be perfect. But at the end of the day, it's a purpose-driven movement to gain that type of level of accomplishment. Okay. So once again, if we think about core training, and of course, core training, people think that, I'm going to be on my back, I'm going to lift up, and I'm going to do 6,000 crunches, and I'm going to strengthen my core. That couldn't be farther from the truth. What we're doing is we're shortening down the muscles of the neck, the sternocleidomastoids. We're overusing our hip flexors. Why do we keep doing these movements when, in all intents and purposes, they're very antiquated? But yet, people say my back is hurting when I do Pilates, my neck is hurting. Well, of course it is when you're doing all this stuff. So, how about an alternative? Why not press the ball here and not even lift our legs up? Find your neutral spine, and when you press onto the ball, what do you feel engaged? My purpose is to feel my breath. So as I inhale and as I exhale and as I press down, I'm going to activate transverse abdominis. I'm activating the diaphragm. I'm maintaining my neutral spine. If I want to add a little bit of intensity, I could lift one leg. I'm still using hip flexor here, which I'm not a big fan of, but nevertheless, if it's brief, I press in and I release and press, release. As simple as something as doing this and pressing into the ball is so much more beneficial than doing 6,000 of these things. Immediately, like if you lift your neck up, put your hands on your neck and feel how those muscles get short and tight. I always tell my clients, do you want short, tight neck muscles? I've never heard one ever say that. Here's another example, bridging. I always hear this, squeeze your booty. Why? Again, if the goal is to lengthen my muscles, which is Pilates training, then why would I squeeze my glutes and do 6,000 pulses? I'm on a blue spring. So I'm going to activate the living heck out of my hamstrings and glutes simply by pressing down into my triceps and lifting my hips and lowering back down. I didn't squeeze anything. Why did I feel that? Because I'm starting in hip flexion and I'm moving into hip extension. What's lifting my hips up into extension is my glutes and hamstrings. The minute I tighten them, I'm shortening the range, I'm shortening the ability for my hamstring to actually work and do its job, and my glute. So I can say, let's lift up. Let's feel what's happening, and now go in and out. Inhale as you press out, exhale as you come back in, and see what you feel versus doing and squeeze and pulse and squeeze and pulse. Again, we feel like we have to be in agonizing pain to get results. And the answer couldn't be farther from the truth. I come from that world. I come from the world of no pain, no gain, landed me a knee replacement. And I can't even begin to tell you how many people I know that have joint issues, back issues, neck issues still to this day because they're doing crunches and they're doing exercises that are dysfunctional. So my whole message in this little section here is truly to walk away and say, why am I doing what I'm doing? Ask yourself, ask your trainer, why am I doing this? See if there's an answer. And if there's an answer that really translates to function, awesome. But if it's like, oh, well, I learned it. No. That's not what you want. You want to walk away with the why. You know how to do it, but understand the why. And you will find that your body will transform so much easier than if we just keep pushing ourselves into pain. This is Leslie, your core training companion, with some little tips on the why behind what we're doing. Thanks for watching.